Now that is the Sacker family story as it has illustrated there, Ravona. The times are changing, I suppose, when it comes to funerals, but I suppose maybe now is the time to look back on some of the traditions we had here in this country down through the years. We're delighted to have folklorist and historian from UCC, Shane Lehane. You're very welcome. I suppose when you look back, we're great in this country for traditions and stuff like this, but there's nothing really set in stone when it comes to funerals, is there?
We've an extraordinary body of lore information about what happened in the past when people died. And there was a very set kind of regime there. It was very, very strong. When somebody died in the past, usually the first thing was to stop the clock. You weren't allowed to touch the body. No family member could go near the body.
Why weren't you allowed to go near the body?
There was a kind of a taboo about death. And usually the way they got over that was that maybe a wise woman, what we call the Banvaughan, she would have come in, she was the corpse washer. She was, because she was old and she was elderly, she was somehow near death herself, so she was insulated from it. And her job was to bring the sheets, bring the candles, bring the paraphernalia of the wake, the grave cloth, the habit perhaps, and in a way she would take over everything. She would keep that corpse water, as it was called, and the very last thing before the corpse was taken out of the house, that would be pushed out afterwards to take death away from the house.
It's almost like they took the place of the funeral home, nearly, in a way.
Absolutely.
That's what it was, the embalmers and all that type of thing.
Absolutely, and they had a very, very strong idea as well that when somebody died, you quite often had to put something around their jaw to keep their jaw up. They put things.
We often see that in old movies or old photos, that they were tied, like a sheet kind of tied up here.
Exactly, and the significant thing was that whatever times that that woman, the Banvaughan, put on the corpse, she had to undo them all before the corpse was put in the coffin in exactly the opposite order to which she made them.
When do these traditions end? I mean, when are we talking about?
It's a very interesting question, because my view is that a lot of these traditions, well, certainly the church put its stop on it. We're talking about the 1930s, 1940s.
Well, that's not that long ago,
no,
really.
it's not that long ago, and it's within living memory, certainly.
But it was all part of grieving as well.
Yes.
If you look, I suppose we all speak about grieving now, but that was part of the grieving back then.
But very, very interestingly, when I said the Banvaughan came in, it was women who took over. When death occurred, it was women who were the officers, if you like, of death, and we had the menachrin, the healing women, and they were professional women who came in, quite often fortified with whiskey. That was their payment, and there was a time when it was you were allowed. They would leave their hair down, something.
But they'd sing songs, really, really sad songs,
magnificent.
Again, I suppose. About the grieving part, it's all part of it as well. But these women were professional grievers in one sense.
Professional killers,
they were, and they had they stayed with the body right until the place of burial. We have illustrations from the 19th century, early 20th century paintings with the keening women literally sitting up on top of the coffin on their way all the way to the graveyard.
So
but do you remember that there would have been anyone in Dingle still doing that in Europe? I suppose not really, but we wouldn't have.
We'd have read about it and stuff like Peg and stuff like that in those books.
But you're probably still thinking the Malquinty. I was thinking of probably up to the 60s people would have done that in Ireland, wouldn't they?
Well, they were brought in professionally, and certainly the women took over in those particular offices.
But I remember when my grandfather died, I was probably only 5 or 6. I remember the clock being stopped. I remember the window being opened as well to leave the spirit out. I think that was the whole
mirrors turned.
The mirrors turned around again. Why the mirror?
Because I think the idea of the mirror was something magical, and you could see into the other world. Quite often, the lack of a shadow or the lack of an image. So the other world was present when death was there, and the mirror somehow you could see someone in that. So there was fear of that.
What about burial grounds and different types or unofficial burial grounds?
And we've an extraordinary tradition of what we call the Calúnig or the Kilini in Irish tradition. Anyone who was not baptised, a young infant when there was high mortality, they weren't given an official burial place. And we have in kind of no man's land, as you would say, between maybe two townlands or between a territory, Krishna Linnev, the crossroads of the children, where we had people buried. But likewise, you had people who might have been considered to be changelings or fairies who would have been bad luck to put them into the family plot. They also got brought to those particular Kilini.
And even if you go say out to the Blasket Islands, then the bodies were brought into the mainland. But I think children were buried on the island itself. So they're very, very strange things when it came to say children and adults were two different things.
And it's something that's happening now, that maybe on the margin of a graveyard outside the wall. And of late, people have begun to acknowledge those, and you will see the children's burial grounds, as they're called. So these unofficial burial grounds are very important.
Some people still wake the dead. I mean, I know that we still have wakes at home.
Yeah,
I think it's a very good idea. I think it's a lovely way to say goodbye to someone.
Yes, it's incredible. But my accounts and the accounts I've been reading over the many years are amazing. What happened at wakes, they were salacious events. They were a bit like the Wren Boys and a bit like the Straw Boys and so on. There was a captain who organised games and mischief and wrestling matches and all sorts of activities. And in fact, I suppose when it came to the mid-19th century, the church really started to stamp those out. But there's still a sense of occasion, of storytelling, drinking, stories about the person celebrating.
I've been in kitchens where the body was there and you were singing songs the same.
Oh, absolutely,
that was
I suppose it's a nice way to say goodbye.
Shane,
Shane.
No trouble.